"You're fired, Miller. Now get out." The word slammed into Sarah like a physical blow, her crime fixing a little boy's bicycle, a precious gift from his deployed father. One act of kindness, and now rent was due, her daughter Lily needed shoes, and Sarah had nothing. Then her phone rang, a stranger's voice, urgent, almost disbelieving. "Mrs. Sarah Miller, you need to come downstairs." "Mom, there are 17 billionaires outside your door, and they're asking for you. From fired to, this could such a thing even be real? If you believe in unexpected chances, or have a story about kindness being rewarded in the most unbelievable way, let us know in the comments. Hit subscribe to see if Sarah's world is about to be turned upside down for the better. The scent of vulcanized rubber and chain grease hung heavy in the air of pine wood bicycles, a perfume Sarah Miller had worn for the better part of 3 years. It was a scent of survival of calloused hands and an aching back, a world away from the lavender and Old Spice that still clung faintly to the collars of Michael's shirts, tucked away in a box beneath her bed. Between the rhythmic clang of tools and the hiss of the air compressor, there was an unspoken burden. Sarah carried a dull, persistent ache in her chest that no amount of hard work could entirely soothe, and a stack of bills on her kitchen counter that seemed to grow taller with each passing week, a paper monument to her anxieties. Her days were a carefully choreographed dance of efficiency and quiet resilience. Before the sun even thought about kissing the rooftops of Fairfield County, Sarah would be up coaxing Lily, her bright-eyed 7-year-old, through breakfast and the morning ritual of mismatched socks and pigtail negotiations. Lily, a miniature version of Michael with his easy smile and thoughtful eyes, was the sun Sarah orbited. Mommy Lily had chirped just that morning, watching Sarah meticulously mend a tear in her work jeans, the fabric worn thin from countless encounters with unforgiving metal. "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a magic sewing machine. One that fixes clothes all by itself." With sparkles, Sarah had managed a genuine smile, a warmth spreading through her despite the chill of their small apartment. "That sounds wonderful, sweet pea. Maybe it can even make us a castle out of old blankets. And a cape for you so you can fly away from Mr. Stone when he's grumpy." If only Sarah had thought, the smile dimming slightly. If only it were that simple. Pinewood Bicycles wasn't a castle, and Harold Stone, its perpetually red-faced owner, was certainly no prince. He was a man Shui's vocabulary seemed limited to profit margins overhead, and no excuses. Sarah knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that she was the best mechanic he had. She could diagnose a ghost in a gearbox with an almost intuitive grace, her fingers tracing invisible faults, her ears tuned to the subtle discord of a misaligned derailleur. She'd learned from Michael, whose touch with anything mechanical had been like a whisper, coaxing life back into the most stubborn of machines. He'd taught her the rhythm of a well-oiled chain, the satisfying click of perfectly set gears, the soul that resided in the steel and rubber. But skill in Harold Stone's ledger was measured only in billable hours and customer turnover. He paid the male mechanics $2 more an hour, despite Sarah's consistently higher repair success rate and the customers who specifically asked for her. "I'm running a business, Mrs. Miller, not a social club." He'd grumbled more than once, his gaze never quite meeting hers. Each Friday, when her meager paycheck landed in her hand, Sarah would perform a silent, grim calculation. With this, she'd often think a wry, internal humor, her only defense. "I can treat myself to a gourmet dinner of half a sandwich and maybe a glance at the dessert menu." The reality was a careful triage: rent, utilities, Lily's school lunch money, and whatever remained was stretched, pulled, and contorted to cover groceries. The coffee can labeled Lily's College Fund on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet held exactly $347.23, a testament to 3 years of scrimping, but a sum that felt more like a whisper than a promise against the rising costs of everything. There was a particular corner in the back of the workshop, dusty and forgotten, piled high with irreparable frames and rusted components. Sometimes during a rare lull, Sarah would find her gaze drifting there. It had once been a space she and Michael had idly dreamt about. Their own shop. Not a grand emporium, but a small, welcoming place. Miller & Miller's Wheels of Wonder. Michael had called it his laughter, echoing in her memory. A place where people weren't just customers, but neighbors. A place where a kid with a wobbly wheel could get it fixed with a smile, maybe learn a thing or two. A place that felt more like community than commerce. The dream had faded with Michael, another casualty of that cold October morning, when his heart had simply given out, leaving Sarah with a mountain of medical bills and a silence in their small home that a 7-year-old's chatter could never quite fill. Miller Stone's voice, sharp as a shard of glass, shattered her reverie. He stood in the doorway of his cramped office, a sheaf of papers in his hand, his face an alarming shade of puce. Customer waiting. Front ends loose on a 10 speed. And I want that parts inventory updated by end of day. No excuses. Sarah nodded, the familiar knot tightening in her stomach. Yes, Mr. Stone. She wiped her hands on a rag, the scent of oil a familiar comfort, and headed towards the front of the shop, the image of the dusty corner receding, filed away with other impossible things. The day wore on a blur of stripped threads, patched tubes, and the occasional grateful smile from a customer. Lily asked again that evening, as Sarah tucked her into bed, her small hand clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit. "Mommy, when can I get new sneakers? The ones with the lights, Susie has them." Sarah smoothed Lily's hair, her heart aching. "Soon, sweet pea. We'll see, okay? She'd make it work. She always did." But the hour was becoming increasingly elusive. Later, after Lily was asleep, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table, the day's mail clutched in her hand. Bills, mostly. And then she saw it. A crisp, official-looking envelope from the building management. Her breath hitched. She knew even before her trembling fingers tore it open that it wouldn't be good news. The words swam before her eyes, stark and unforgiving. Notice of rent increase. A significant increase, one that would stretch their already threadbare budget plastic the breaking point. She stared at the numbers, a cold dread seeping into her bones, far colder than the drafty apartment. The familiar scent of grease on her hands suddenly felt like the smell of a trap closing in. The weight she carried, usually hidden so well, pressed down on her, suffocating, relentless. The list of bills on her counter had just grown impossibly longer. The notice of the rent increase lay on Sarah Miller's small kitchen table like a declaration of war. Its stark black print, a chilling counterpoint to the cheerful crayon-drawn sun Lily had taped to the refrigerator. Sleep had been a restless, shallow thing, punctuated by anxious calculations that danced mockingly behind her eyelids. Each number was a dead end, each potential, saving a drop in an ever-widening ocean of debt. The next morning, the workshop at Pinewood Bicycles felt less like a refuge and more like a cage, the scent of oil and rubber now tinged with the metallic tang of her own quiet desperation. It was a sweltering June afternoon, the kind where the heat waves shimmered above the asphalt, and the air itself felt thick enough to chew. The bell above the shop door chimed a surprisingly cheerful sound in the oppressive heat, and a small shadow fell across the threshold. A boy stood there no older than 10, his shoulders slumped, his sun-bleached hair clinging to a forehead, damp with perspiration. His eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, were fixed on the mangled wreckage of a bicycle he was half dragging, half carrying beside him. It was a vintage Schwinn Stingray, or what was left of it, its once vibrant blue frame bent at an unnatural angle, the front wheel twisted like a discarded piece of modern art. It looked, Sarah thought with a pang, like it was gasping for its last breath. This, she would soon learn, was Ethan Jones, and his arrival carried a plea that resonated far deeper than the humid air of the workshop. Sarah put down the wrench she'd been using to coax a stubborn pedal, her own worries momentarily eclipsed by the raw distress radiating from the child. "Well, hello there," she said gently, her voice softer than she usually allowed it to be within Pinewood's walls. "Looks like you've had a bit of an adventure." Ethan's lower lip trembled. He gestured towards the ruined bicycle with a small, shaky hand. Can you fix it, Mum?" he asked, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Please." Sarah knelt her gaze, taking in the full extent of the damage. This wasn't just a simple repair. The frame was severely compromised. The handlebars dangled precariously, and the custom chain guard, painted with a fading army star, was cracked clean through. Engraved on the handlebars, scarred but still legible, was the name Ethan, and beneath it, smaller, from Dad. Military unit decals faded by sun and time clung to what remained of the frame. It was a bicycle steeped in love and memory. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice gentle. It played hide-and-seek with a logging truck." Ethan mumbled a tear, finally escaping, and tracing a dusty path down his freckled cheek. "Mr. Clark's truck. From next door. I left it at the end of our driveway. He said he didn't see it." He sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Mum's trying to talk to his insurance, but they said it takes a long time, and the 4th of July parade is next week." He looked up at Sarah, his eyes wide and pleading. "My dad, he's Mr. Jones, Captain Jones. He's deployed. He gave me this bike right before he left. He spent months finding this exact model, he said, just like the one he had when he was my age. Then he customized it all special for me." His voice cracked. It's one of the only things I have that's really his until he comes home. He said he might even get to watch the parade on video chat if his unit isn't on patrol." Sarah's heart clenched. Michael. Lily. The ache was a familiar companion. She understood with a clarity that bypassed thought the profound significance of this mangled machine. It wasn't just a bicycle. It was a lifeline, a tangible connection to an absent father, a symbol of love and hope. She ran a practiced hand over the bent frame, assessing. It would need specialized parts. Parts Pinewood definitely didn't stock. The frame would require the hydraulic press, a delicate and time-consuming operation, and the custom details, restoring those would take care, precision, and time she technically didn't have. "Well, now that is a special bike," Sarah said more to herself than to Ethan. She could almost hear Harold Stone's voice in her head. "No charity cases, Miller. We're here to make money, not friends." As if on cue, the door to Stone's office creaked open. He emerged, his face already flushed from the heat, or more likely his perpetual state of aggravation. "What's all this, Miller?" He barked, his eyes narrowing at Ethan and the wrecked bicycle. "We got paying customers waiting. Just assessing a potential repair, Mr. Stone," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. Stone snorted, his gaze flicking dismissively over the Schwinn. "Looks like a write-off to me. Kid, tell your folks to buy a new one. We don't do miracles here, especially not for free." He glanced at Sarah. "Unless they've got deep pockets for custom parts and labor, which I doubt." Ethan flinched as if struck. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger, a rare heat rising within her. She stood, placing herself subtly between Stone and the boy. "It's a very important bike to him, Mr. Stone. His father is serving overseas. Not my problem, Stone retorted, waving a dismissive hand. If he can't pay for a full restoration, upfront parts included, then there's nothing to discuss. We don't stock parts for ancient history like that anyway. Now get back to that Thompson order. He retreated into his office, the door shutting with a decisive thud. The silence he left behind was heavy. Ethan's shoulders sagged, and the hope that had flickered in his eyes was extinguished. He looked down at his sneakers, scuffing one against the grimy floor. Sarah watched him, her own financial anxieties warring fiercely with the image of Lily's hopeful face, with the memory of Michael's pride in his own lovingly maintained tools, the rent increase notice, Lily's sneakers, the dwindling numbers in her bank account, and then Ethan's tear-streaked face. She took a deep breath. The decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like an imperative, an echo of Michael's unwavering kindness. "Ethan," she said softly, waiting until he looked up. "Don't you worry about Mr. Stone." She glanced towards the closed office door, then back at the boy. "Bring your bike around to the service entrance after we close. 6 o'clock. We'll see what magic we can really do." A tiny spark returned to Ethan's eyes. "Really, but how much will it cost?" Sarah thought of the $83.47 she had painstakingly set aside for the week's groceries and a partial payment on the overdue electricity bill. It was nearly a full day's wages for her. She pushed the thought away. "Don't you worry about that right now," she said, managing a reassuring smile and ruffling his hair. "You just bring the bike, and we'll make sure your dad sees you riding proud in that parade." Later that evening, long after Harold Stone had locked up and grumbled his way home, Sarah unlocked the service entrance. Ethan was there as promised, his hopeful face illuminated by the single bare bulb above the door. Together they wheeled the battered Schwinn into the silent workshop. Under the brighter lights, the damage seemed even more daunting. But as Sarah began to meticulously list the needed parts, a different feeling started to take root, alongside the anxiety, a quiet determination, a craftsman's resolve. This wasn't just a repair anymore. It was a mission. After Ethan left his small thank you, echoing in the stillness, Sarah drove to Harlow's Hardware on the other side of town, the grocery money clutched tightly in her hand. The specialized vintage parts for the limited edition Stingray were even more expensive than she'd anticipated. Each nut, each bolt, each strip of custom decal material felt like a lead weight. As the cashier rang up the total, a sum that made her stomach clench, Sarah Miller knew she was crossing a line, stepping away from the precarious safety of her budget into a realm of pure, unadulterated faith. Faith in a boy's love for his father, and a quiet, stubborn faith in the power of her own 2 hands. The clink of the coins as she paid was the sound of her safety net fraying thread by precious thread. Longer nights began to blur into a rhythm of their own, a clandestine symphony played out under the solitary glow of the workshop's utility lights. Secrets were now stitched into the fabric of Sarah Miller's evenings, nestled beside the ever-present worry that gnawed at the edges of her resolve. With each careful turn of a wrench, each precise adjustment to a gear, she felt she was mending more than just Ethan Jones's battered bicycle. She was trying to piece together a fragile sense of hope in a world that seemed determined to grind it into dust. The $83.47 she'd spent on parts for the Schwinn Stingray had carved a gaping hole in her already strained finances. The unpaid electricity bill now bore a stark red final notice stamp. Lily, bless her innocent heart, had started asking with increasing frequency why they were having picnic dinners of sandwiches on the living room floor instead of real food at the table. Sarah would just smile, a carefully constructed mask of reassurance, and talk about how much fun indoor picnics were. All the while, the numbers from the rent increase notice performed a frantic jig in her mind. But in the quiet solitude of Pinewood bicycles, after hours with the city's muted hum, a distant soundtrack, Sarah found a strange kind of peace. The mangled blue frame of Ethan's bike lay on her workbench like a patient awaiting surgery. She straightened the frame with the hydraulic press, a slow, painstaking process, demanding both strength and an intuitive feel for the metal's memory. She replaced the twisted front wheel, truing the new spokes with a meticulousness that bordered on obsession. The custom-engraved handlebars were a particular challenge. She carefully sourced a near-identical replacement, then painstakingly replicated the Ethan and From Dad engravings. Her small Dremel tool whining softly in the stillness, each stroke a prayer for precision. She even managed to find a matching shade of blue paint to touch up the scratches, and with a fine brush, she lovingly restored the army star on the chain guard. Michael would have been proud, she thought, a familiar ache tightening her chest. He'd always said that every machine had a story, a soul, and a good mechanic listened to it, respected it. She was listening now to the silent story of a boy and his soldier father, a story held within the scarred steel and worn decals of this special bicycle. After 3 such evenings, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering sense of purpose, the transformation was astounding. The Schwinn Stingray gleamed under the workshop lights, not just repaired, but reborn. It looked almost new, every custom detail lovingly restored, a vibrant testament to Sarah's skill and dedication. She'd arranged for Ethan to come by on Friday afternoon, just before closing, hoping Harold Stone would be too preoccupied with weekend figures to notice. When the boy arrived, his eyes, which had been clouded with worry for days, widened first in disbelief, then in pure, unadulterated joy. Wow! He breathed, his small hand reaching out to trace the freshly painted frame. It looks even better than before. He spun a pedal, and the chain moved with a smooth, satisfying whir. He looked up at Sarah, his face a beacon of radiant happiness. "Miss Sarah," he exclaimed, his voice brimming with awe, Are you a bicycle fairy godmother?" Sarah laughed, a genuine light sound that felt foreign and wonderful. "Something like that, Ethan. Now what do you say? We take it for a very short test ride out back, just to be sure." As Ethan carefully wheeled the gleaming bicycle towards the rear service door, a customer who had been browsed the new models near the front window paused. It was a man in his late 50s, dressed in a simple denim shirt and well-worn jeans, but with an air of quiet confidence about him. He'd been in the shop for a while, asking a few intelligent questions about a touring bike. His name, Sarah recalled from their brief interaction earlier, was James Harrison. He watched Ethan and the bicycle with a thoughtful, unreadable expression, a slight smile playing on his lips. Neither Sarah nor Ethan, in their shared moment of triumph, heard the distinct, heavy tread of Harold Stone's work boots approaching from his office. What in the blazes is going on here? Miller Stone's voice cracked through the workshop like a bullwhip, instantly shattering the joyful atmosphere. Sarah spun around, her heart plummeting. Stone stood framed in his office doorway, his face contorted in a mask of fury, his eyes fixed on the gleaming blue bicycle. Ethan froze, his smile vanishing, replaced by a look of pure terror. "Mr. Stone." Sarah began, her voice steady, despite the sudden lurch in her stomach. "I was just finishing up. This is Ethan's bike." Ethan's bike, Stone spat, advancing towards them. "The one I distinctly recall telling you was a write-off. The one I said we wouldn't touch unless there was cold, hard cash on the barrelhead." His gaze swept over the pristine bicycle. "And what's this? You've used my shop, my equipment, My time to run a damn charity ward. I paid for all the parts myself. Mr. Stone. Sarah explained, trying to keep her tone respectful, but firm. And I did all the work on my own time after hours. James Harrison. Sarah noticed out of the corner of her eye, had moved slightly closer, an ostensibly casual observer to the unfolding drama. Own time. Stone scoffed his face, reddening further. Don't insult my intelligence, Miller. I checked the security footage from the alley this morning. I saw you working on this thing during your lunch breaks for the past 3 days. Lunch breaks are company time when you're on my premises. It was a lie, or at least a gross exaggeration. She'd been meticulously careful to only eat her sandwich during lunch, the actual repair work happening late at night. But she knew arguing the point was futile. He turned his glare on Ethan. Take your bike and get out of here, kid, and don't come back. Ethan looked at Sarah, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. He hesitated, then quickly wheeled the Schwinn towards the front door, pausing only to whisper a choked, "Thank you, Miss Sarah." Once Ethan was gone, Stone rounded on Sarah, his voice dripping with contempt. I've overlooked a lot with you, Miller, because I'll admit you're a decent enough wrench. But this is a flagrant disregard for company policy, for my direct orders. That boy's father is serving our country overseas. Mr. Stone, Sarah said her own anger, now simmering beneath the surface. That bicycle is more than just a toy to him. It's a connection, a piece of his heart. Not my problem, Stone roared, jabbing a finger in her direction. My problem is an employee who thinks she can make up her own rules. My problem is an employee who steals company time and resources. I stole nothing, Sarah's voice rose, her composure finally cracking. I gave that boy a little bit of hope, something you clearly wouldn't recognize if it hit you in the face. Stone's eyes narrowed into slits. That's it, Miller. You're done. Clear out your toolbox. You're fired. The word stark and brutal hung in the air. Fired. For an act of kindness. For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. The workshop, her meager lifeline, the place she'd poured her skill and her quiet grief into, was suddenly irrevocably gone. The rent increase. Lily. The coffee can with its pitiful savings. It all crashed down on her with crushing weight. She stood there, trembling slightly, a wave of despair washing over her. Then a calm, steady voice cut through the charged silence. "Excuse me," James Harrison said, stepping forward from where he'd been observing, near the racks of new bicycles. Mr. Stone, was it? His tone was polite, almost deferential, yet it carried an undeniable undercurrent of authority. I couldn't help but overhear. A door had slammed shut in Sarah Miller's life, the sound of Harold Stone's furious, "You're fired," still echoing in the sudden, stunned silence of Pinewood bicycles. The future just moments before a path she navigated with careful, weary steps now yawned before her, a bleak and empty chasm. But elsewhere in the unseen, crackling currents of the digital world, a different kind of spark was igniting a story, beginning to be told not in hushed whispers, but in thousands of shares, countless comments, and as Sarah would later discover with a grimace, a fair few choice remarks directed squarely at her former employer. Harold Stone, momentarily taken aback by James Harrison's calm interjection, merely grunted. "This is an internal staff matter, sir. Nothing that concerns you." Mr. Harrison's gaze, however, remained steady, not on Stone, but on Sarah, as she numbly began to gather her few personal tools from the workbench, her movements heavy with defeat. A shame, he said, his voice still quiet, but carrying a resonance that seemed to fill the workshop. In my experience, people with that kind of skill and that kind of heart, they're a rare find, an asset to any business that values more than just the bottom line. He paused, then pulled a simple, elegant business card from his wallet. "Mrs. Miller, when you're finished here, I'd like a brief word with you outside, if you have a moment." Sarah could only nod, her throat too tight for words. The name on the card read, James Harrison, CEO, Harrison Industries. The logo was understated, a stylized H that spoke of quiet power. Harrison Industries. She'd heard of them, of course. One of the largest, most respected manufacturing firms in the state, known for innovation and ironically for their fair labor practices and community involvement. What could a man like that possibly want with a freshly fired bicycle mechanic? The walk home with her toolbox, usually a mundane 5 blocks, felt like a journey across a barren desert. Each step was an effort, the weight of the tools a physical manifestation of the burden now crushing her spirit. The apartment, once a haven, however small and imperfect, now felt like a cage of impending eviction. How would she tell Lily? How could she look into those bright, trusting eyes and explain that Mommy didn't have a job anymore, that the new sneakers with the lights were now an impossible dream? She sank onto the worn sofa, the rent increase notice still mocking her from the kitchen table. The silence of the apartment pressed in. For a long, bleak moment, she allowed herself to question it all. That reckless act of kindness. Had it been worth this, worth the fear that was now a cold fist clenching her heart, worth the potential hardship she'd brought upon her own child, the familiar ache of Michael's absence intensified, morphing into a desperate longing for his calm strength, his unwavering belief in her. Later that evening, after a subdued dinner of canned soup and toast, the picnic pretense wearing dangerously thin, and after tucking a strangely quiet Lily into bed, Sarah slumped in front of the ancient television, its flickering images a meaningless distraction. She should be scouring online job boards, polishing a resume that hadn't been updated in years. But the energy, the will had leached out of her. It was then that her phone, resting ping moo, down on the coffee table, buzzed with a notification from a local community forum she occasionally browsed. Fairfield mechanic, fired for kindness, the headline read. Her blood ran cold. With trembling hands, she tapped the link. There it was, a slightly shaky but undeniably clear cell phone video of her confrontation with Harold Stone. Someone, a customer perhaps, had filmed the entire ugly exchange. Stone's bellowing accusations, her own faltering attempts to explain about Ethan and his father, the customized Schwinn gleaming innocently in the background, and Stone's final dismissive, "Not my problem," followed by the brutal, "You're fired." Sarah stared in horrified fascination as the view counter ticked relentlessly upwards. Hundreds, then thousands. The comment section was a torrent of outrage, sympathy, and shared anecdotes of similar workplace injustices. That poor woman, one read. And for helping a soldier's kid, shame on that boss, another declared. And then her personal favorite, a comment that wrung a hysterical little laugh from her tight chest. Great. Just great. Now the whole world knows I was fired on what was officially my worst hair day ever. The story was spreading like wildfire. Local news websites began to pick it up, their headlines even more sensational. Cycle of shame, local mechanic, axed for mending, soldier's son's bike, or Pinewood's heartless boss. Viral video sparks. Outrage. Most articles highlighted the unique, customized nature of the Schwinn Stingray, the Army Star, the engraved handlebars, the decals of Ethan's father's unit, the 101st Airborne, a unit with a storied history and deep local connections, something Sarah hadn't fully registered in her haste. One news report even showed a close-up still from the video, focusing on a small, almost overlooked custom-painted insignia near the rear axle of Ethan's bike, a tiny, stylized beacon. It was a detail so specific, so seemingly insignificant, Yet it was about to become a signal flare seen by eyes she couldn't possibly imagine were watching. Sarah switched off her phone, her face burning. This was a nightmare. This viral notoriety wasn't going to help her find a new job. It would brand her, make her a pariah to any employer wary of drama. She went to bed with a pounding headache, the glowing screen of the viral video seared onto the inside of her eyelids. Sleep, when it finally came, was a fitful, shallow escape, plagued by images of Harold Stone's furious face and Lily's questioning eyes. She was adrift a tiny boat in a vast, stormy sea with no land in sight. The shrill ring of her phone jolted her awake. For a confused moment, she thought it was her alarm, but a glance at the bedside clock showed it was only 5:47 a.m. The pre-dawn light was a pale, hesitant grey, filtering through the thin curtains. An unknown number glowed on the screen. Probably a wrong number, or worse, a debt collector already. With a sigh of resignation, she answered her voice, thick with sleep and unshed tears. Hello. When dawn hadn't fully broken, its pale light still tentative against the stubborn shadows of night, Sarah Miller's world was about to be irrevocably altered. The unknown number on her phone screen felt ominous, another harbinger of bad news in a life already saturated with it. Hello. She'd answered her voice, a mere croak. It wasn't a debt collector. It was Mrs. Peterson, her elderly, eagle-eyed neighbor from the first floor. Her voice a crackling mix of excitement and utter bewilderment. Sarah, dear, are you awake? You simply must come down here, right now, Mrs. Peterson. What is it? Is something wrong? Sarah sat bolt upright, her heart instantly thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Wrong? Oh, I don't think wrong. Quite covers it, dear. Unless you're expecting a motorcade of some sort, Sarah. There's what looks like a high-fashion show happening right outside your apartment building. All these incredibly fancy cars, the kind you only see in movies, and people, well, they look like they've stepped straight out of Forbes magazine. And the most peculiar thing, dear, they're asking for you. Definitely not asking to borrow a cup of sugar. I can tell you that 17 billionaires. Sarah's mind struggled to process the words. It had to be a mistake. A dream. Perhaps Mrs. Peterson, bless her heart, had gotten confused. But the urgency in her neighbor's voice was undeniable. Throwing on a pair of jeans and the first T-shirt she could find, acutely aware, even in her dazed state, that it probably wasn't her most presentable attire for meeting, whoever these people were. Sarah quickly braided her hair, her fingers clumsy, with a mixture of apprehension and disbelief. She peeked into Lily's room. Her daughter was still fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the peculiar drama unfolding downstairs. What she saw in the parking lot made her stop dead in her tracks, halfway down the creaking apartment building stairs. Mrs. Peterson hadn't been exaggerating. At least a dozen sleek dark vehicles, luxury sedans, high-end SUVs, even a formidable-looking pickup truck that gleamed expensively under the emerging dawn light, were parked in a silent, imposing semicircle around the building's modest entrance. Standing in small, quiet groups, conversing in low tones, were men and women impeccably dressed in business-casual attire that radiated an aura of understated wealth and influence. They were indeed the kind of people one usually only glimpsed on financial news channels or the society pages. And in the center of it, all leaning casually against a polished black sedan, as if this were the most normal pre-dawn gathering in the world, stood James Harrison. He spotted her almost immediately, a slight, reassuring smile touching his lips as he pushed himself off the car and walked towards her. Mrs. Miller, he called out his voice, calm and warm, cutting through the chilly morning air. Sarah, I hope we didn't wake you too early. Mr. Harrison. Sarah managed her voice barely a whisper. She felt Lily, who had silently followed her downstairs, drawn by the unusual commotion, press close against her leg. Lily's eyes were wide as saucers. Mummy Lily whispered, her small voice filled with awe as she peeked around Sarah's jeans at the assembly of strangers. Do they look like kings and queens from fairy tales? Does that man have a crown hidden under his hat? Sarah gently squeezed Lily's shoulder, her own mind reeling. I don't know, sweet pea. She looked at James Harrison, her expression a mixture of confusion and trepidation. What is all this? The Sarah James Harrison said, gesturing expansively towards the gathered crowd, who now turned their attention towards her, with expressions of polite interest, are some friends and associates of mine. We're all part of a rather discreet foundation, a sort of investment alliance, you might say. We call ourselves the Beacon Alliance. A woman in her early 60s with a kind face, intelligent eyes, and an air of quiet authority stepped forward. She was elegantly dressed, a simple pearl necklace, her only adornment. "Eleanor Vance," she said, extending a hand towards Sarah, her smile genuine. "I own Vance Family Orchards. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Miller. Mr. Harrison, has told us a great deal." One by one, others in the group offered brief, courteous nods or quiet greetings. There were entrepreneurs, executives, innovators, men and women who had clearly achieved remarkable success, yet there was no arrogance about them, only a calm, focused energy. The Beacon Alliance. James Harrison continued his gaze, direct and sincere, was formed by individuals who at critical junctures in our own lives were often helped by unexpected kindness, by people who saw potential where others saw none. Now we try to do the same. We seek out individuals of exceptional character and skill, people who do the right thing, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult, and we offer support. Sarah was still trying to absorb the sheer unreality of it all. But, why me? I don't understand. Harrison's smile was gentle. The video of your unfortunate dismissal from Pinewood Bicycle, Sarah, it went viral, as you know. Many of us saw it. And while Mr. Stone's behavior was, shall we say, regrettable, what truly captured our attention was your profound act of kindness towards young Ethan Jones and the story of his father's bicycle. He paused, and his expression became more focused. You see, Sarah, that bicycle, the Schwinn Stingray, and particularly Ethan's father's unit, the 101st Airborne. It holds a very specific, very personal significance for every single one of us here. He gestured again to the group. Some of us had fathers, brothers, or sons who served and served with distinction in that very unit. Some of us in our younger, less prosperous days found our first taste of freedom or earned our first dollars on a bicycle just like that one. But more than that. He gestured for another member of the group to step forward, a man holding a tablet. The man tapped the screen, and an enlarged image from the viral video appeared. A close-up of the small, custom-painted insignia near the rear axle of Ethan's bike, the tiny, stylized beacon Sarah hadn't paid much mind to. That insignia, Sarah Harrison said, his voice, resonating with a deeper emotion, is a variation of a private emblem adopted by a small group of servicemen from the 101st during a particularly arduous campaign decades ago. A symbol of unwavering loyalty, quiet courage, and looking out for one another no matter the cost. My own father was one of those men. And as it happens, he looked around at his companions, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. So were the fathers or grandfathers of nearly everyone standing here today. Our alliance, in many ways, was founded on the very principles that Tiny Beacon represents. When we saw it and understood the context of your selfless actions to preserve what it symbolized for that boy and his deployed father, well, it was a clear signal to us. a call to act. Eleanor Vance stepped forward again. My late husband Robert served with Jackson's father. He always said, "Eleanor, when you see true character in action, you nurture it. It's the rarest commodity." What you did, Mrs. Miller, in the face of your own struggles, that was true character. Another man, younger, with a keen, energetic look, added, "Simply put, Mrs. Miller, we like good people doing good things." And he grinned a flash of unexpected disarming humor. We happened to have a bit of spare change. The air crackled with an almost surreal energy. Sarah felt Lily squeeze her hand tighter. 17 billionaires. Here. For her. Because of a mended bicycle and a tiny forgotten symbol. James Harrison then stepped closer, holding out a plain, cream-colored envelope. "Sarah, before we discuss anything further, we want to present this to you. Please consider it a token of our collective admiration and perhaps a form of earned recognition for your exceptional skill and integrity, which were so poorly recompensed by your former employer. Enough to tide you over to clear away those immediate worries so you can consider what comes next with a clear head." Her fingers trembled as she took the envelope. Inside, nestled against the heavy cardstock, was a cashier's check. The amount written on it made her gasp, her vision blurring for a moment. It was more money than she had seen in one place in her entire life, more than enough to cover the rent increase, the electricity bill, new sneakers for Lily, and still leave a cushion that felt like a king-sized mattress of security. I can't accept this. She whispered the words, catching in her throat, tears finally spilling over and streaming down her face. "This couldn't be real. You already have, my dear Eleanor Vance," said her voice, incredibly kind, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The check is made out to you, and not a single one of us would dream of taking it back. Think of it as severance pay from a universe that occasionally likes to balance the books." Sarah looked from the check to the faces of these strangers, these 17 arbiters of an unimaginable fate, and then down at Lily, who was looking up at her with wide, questioning eyes. The pre-dawn light was now giving way to a fuller, brighter morning, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sarah Miller felt a flicker not of anxiety, but of an almost forgotten sensation hope. A wild, improbable, and utterly breathtaking hope. The cashier's check felt heavy in Sarah Miller's trembling hand, its crisp edges a tangible anchor in the swirling sea of disbelief and dawning hope. It was a gift not merely of money, but of breathing room, a sudden miraculous clearing in the dense forest of her anxieties. But as James Harrison's kind eyes met hers, she sensed that this was not the entirety of their purpose, not the full measure of this extraordinary morning. The air still hummed with an unspoken anticipation, a sense that the true proposal, the one that could perhaps turn her long-buried dreams into a living, breathing reality, was yet to come, along with a mountain of responsibility and expectations that felt as high as any skyscraper. Sarah James Harrison began, his voice gentle, yet imbued with a quiet excitement. That initial sum is, as we said, a recognition of your past efforts and a way to clear your immediate path. But the Beacon Alliance, we are primarily investors. We invest in people, and we believe wholeheartedly that you are an exceptional investment. He gestured to another member of the group, a sharply dressed woman who unfurled a sleek presentation folder. Inside, Sarah caught glimpses of architectural sketches, financial projections, and what looked like a vibrant community outreach plan. "We are not here simply to give you a fish," Sarah Harrison continued, a smile playing on his lips. "We are here because we believe you can and will build an entire fishing fleet, one that will nourish an entire community." We want to fund you, Sarah, to establish a new kind of bicycle shop right here in Fairfield County. Your shop. Eleanor Vance stepped forward, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. We envision a place called Wheels of Hope Community Cycles, she said, her voice painting a vivid picture. A shop that embodies everything Pinewood Bicycles was not. A place where quality repairs are performed by skilled hands at fair prices, where young people, perhaps those from disadvantaged backgrounds, can learn a valuable trade, an apprenticeship program under your guidance, Sarah. A place that partners with local schools and shelters to provide refurbished bicycles at low or no cost to families in need. A hub of skill, of community, of second chances. Sarah listened, her heart pounding a strange rhythm against her ribs, a mixture of soaring elation and a sudden vertiginous wave of fear. Her own shop, the dream she and Michael had once whispered about in the quiet hours, the one she had locked away as an impossible fantasy, was now being laid before her, gift-wrapped in the resources and faith of 17 billionaires. Her mind raced. I'm only used to wrenches and oil and grease, she thought, a hysterical bubble of internal laughter rising. Now it's business plans and meetings and managing something so significant. I'll probably need a few more gallons of coffee just to start. She looked at James Harrison, at Eleanor Vance, at the expectant, hopeful faces surrounding her. The sheer magnitude of their belief in her was overwhelming. Mr. Harrison? Eleanor? Everyone. She began, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. It's more than I could ever have imagined. The generosity is astounding. She took a shaky breath. But it's also enormous. A responsibility like that. I'm just one person, a mechanic. What if I'm not capable? What if I fail? I couldn't bear to disappoint your trust, not after all this. The fear was real, a cold counterpoint to the warmth of their offer. The memory of her past struggles, the constant fight to stay afloat, made the prospect of helming such a significant venture feel daunting, almost terrifying. She thought of Lily, of the stability this could offer, but also of the risk. James Harrison's expression softened with understanding. Sarah, he said, his voice kind but firm. We haven't undertaken this lightly. We've seen your skill. We've witnessed your character under duress. We've heard the passion in your voice when you spoke of Ethan's bicycle, of what it represented. The Beacon Alliance doesn't just invest capital. We invest in potential, in integrity, in heart. We're not looking for a seasoned CEO to run a franchise, Sarah. We were looking for you. For your hands, your expertise, and yes, your heart. We will provide every resource you need. Financial backing, business, mentorship, legal support, marketing, anything. You won't be alone. Eleanor Vance placed a comforting hand on Sarah's arm. My dear, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it. We all started somewhere, often with far less support than you'll have. That dream you and your Michael shared. Perhaps this is its time. Sarah looked down at Lily, who was now beaming her earlier shyness, forgotten, clearly captivated by the talk of a new bicycle shop. The image of Michael's proud smile flashed in her mind. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Lily's future, about honoring Michael's memory, about transforming her own quiet dream into something that could touch so many other lives. She spent the rest of that day in a daze, the check safely tucked away, the proposal from the Beacon Alliance, replaying constantly in her mind. That evening she sat down with Lily at their small kitchen table, the remnants of a celebratory and properly funded pizza dinner between them. Sweet pea. Sarah began taking Lily's small hands in hers. Those nice people this morning. They want to help Mommy build a brand new bicycle shop, a really special one. She explained the idea, her voice growing stronger, more confident, as she outlined the vision for Wheels of Hope. Lily's eyes, already wide, grew even wider, shining with an almost incandescent excitement. A real shop your shop, Mommy, with lots and lots of bikes. Yes, baby, my shop. Wow. Lily bounced in her seat. That's the bestest news ever. Wonderful. So she leaned in conspiratorially, her expression deadly serious. Can I be Vice President in charge of children's bicycle testing? Mommy, I'm very good at testing. Sarah laughed, a real unrestrained laugh that seemed to chase away the last of the shadows. I think that can definitely be arranged, my little Vice President. The next morning, her heart lighter than it had been in years, yet pounding with a new purposeful rhythm, Sarah called James Harrison. Her voice was clear, steady, devoid of the tremor that had plagued it for so long. Mr. Harrison, she said, Sarah Miller speaking. About your proposal. I'm in, I'm all in. A wide smile spread across James Harrison's face, audible even over the phone. Sarah, that's wonderful news. Truly wonderful. We had no doubt. Later that week, Sarah found herself in a bright, airy boardroom at Harrison Industries, a place that felt a million miles away from the grime and frustration of Pinewood bicycles. Spread across a large mahogany table were initial architectural sketches for Wheels of Hope community cycles. James Harrison, Eleanor Vance, and a few key members of their team were there, their faces alight with enthusiasm as they discussed layouts, color schemes, and equipment. Sarah, initially intimidated, soon found herself caught up in their energy, her own expertise and passion for her craft bubbling to the surface. She pointed out the optimal placement for the repair bays, suggested a dedicated area for the youth apprenticeship program, her voice gaining confidence with each contribution. As she looked at the drawings at the tangible beginnings of her dream, a powerful wave of emotion washed over her. Not fear this time, but a profound sense of gratitude and an exhilarating, almost fierce determination. The wheels of fate so long stuck in a rut of hardship were finally truly beginning to turn. And Sarah Miller, with a little help from some unexpected friends, was ready to steer them towards a brighter horizon. A year. 12 months that had spun by with the dizzying speed of a well-oiled freewheel, yet each day had been as purposefully packed as a pannier for a cross-country journey. Yesterday's fragile seeds of hope, planted in the fertile ground of unexpected generosity, had not just sprouted. They had blossomed with a vibrant, resilient beauty. Wheels of Hope community cycles wasn't just a shop front on Main Street anymore. It was a testament to the extraordinary power of kindness, the quiet strength of perseverance, and, as Sarah Miller often joked to a beaming Lily, the logistical challenge of occasionally finding parking for 17 assorted luxury vehicles when the Beacon Alliance board members dropped by. The journey from a tearful, overwhelmed acceptance in a corporate boardroom to this sun-drenched grand opening day had been a whirlwind of focused effort. Sarah, with the unwavering professional support of James Harrison's team and the wise counsel of Eleanor Vance, had poured her heart and soul into every detail. They'd found the perfect location, a spacious former auto parts store in a part of town that desperately needed a lift. The design was open, welcoming with gleaming workstations, a comfortable seating area where neighbors could chat over a cup of coffee, and a dedicated, well-lit corner for the youth apprenticeship program. Sarah herself had interviewed and selected the first intake of apprentices, 3 bright, eager teenagers from challenging backgrounds, kids who just needed a chance, a guiding hand, someone to believe in them. She'd spent hours with them, not just teaching them the mechanics of bicycle repair, but also the ethics of good workmanship, the importance of customer service, and the quiet dignity of a job done well. Michael's patient teaching style echoed in her own instructions, his remembered words a constant source of guidance. And now on this bright Saturday morning, Wheels of Hope Community Cycles was officially open, its wide doors thrown back to welcome the bustling crowd. The air thrummed with excited chatter, the scent of new tires mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cookies baked by Mrs. Peterson, who was proudly overseeing the refreshment table. Local families, curious neighbors, and even a few city officials milled about, admiring the gleaming rows of new and expertly refurbished bicycles. Sarah, her face flushed with a mixture of happy exhaustion and profound gratitude, moved through the crowd, a welcoming smile for everyone. Lily, now a confident 8-year-old and self-appointed vice president in charge of children's bicycle testing, and bell ringing, proudly showed off the kids' section, her new light-up sneakers flashing with every enthusiastic step. In a place of honor near the main counter, mounted carefully on the wall, was Ethan Jones's blue Schwinn Stingray. It gleamed under a spotlight, its story typed neatly on a small plaque beside it. Ethan himself stood nearby, beside a man in a crisp army dress uniform. Captain Jones, his father, home on, leave his arm around his son's shoulders, his eyes shining with unspeakable pride as he looked at Sarah. "This, Dad," Ethan announced to anyone within earshot, his voice ringing with importance as he gestured to the Schwinn, "is the most famous bike in the whole wide world. It even has a fan club of really nice billionaire uncles and aunts." Captain Jones chuckled, shaking his head in affectionate disbelief before extending a firm, grateful handshake to Sarah. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "There aren't words enough." Across the bustling shop, Sarah caught a glimpse of a familiar, yet somehow diminished figure lurking near the window of the bakery opposite. Harold Stone. He stared for a long moment at the vibrant scene inside Wheels of Hope, then at his own mostly empty storefront, where a small, discreet "For Lease" sign had recently appeared in the window. A flicker of something, regret, envy, crossed his face before he turned and shuffled away, a man overshadowed by the very kindness he had so contemptuously dismissed. James Harrison and Eleanor Vance, along with a few other members of the Beacon Alliance, who had become familiar, friendly faces over the past year, watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction from a less crowded corner. They didn't seek the limelight, their pleasure clearly derived from witnessing the vibrant impact of their investment. Eleanor, holding a cup of Mrs. Peterson's excellent coffee, caught Sarah's eye and smiled warmly. "You look even busier than I was when I first started my apple orchard all those years ago, Sarah," she remarked, her eyes twinkling. "But your smile, my dear, is a whole lot brighter." I must say, James Harrison approached Sarah, his own smile genuine and full of pride. "You've built something truly special here, Sarah," he said, his voice low and sincere. "More than just a shop. You've built a community. You've built hope. That's precisely what the Beacon Alliance stands for." He paused. "This is your earned peace, Sarah. Enjoy every moment." Later, as the grand opening crowd began to thin, Sarah found herself standing near the large front window of her shop, Lily nestled contentedly beside her, idly polishing the bell of a shiny new tricycle. The late afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows across Main Street. She looked at the gleaming tools on the workbenches, at the young apprentice diligently reassembling a wheel, at the laughter spilling from the children's corner, at the simple, hopeful motto painted above the door, "Wheels of Hope Community Cycles, where every turn carries hope and kindness." The ache of Michael's loss was still there, a gentle thrum beneath the surface, but it was no longer a raw, open wound. It had softened, transformed into a warm, loving memory that fueled her purpose rather than crippled her spirit. He would have loved this place, she knew. He would have been so incredibly proud. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a peace born not of an easy life, but of resilience, of kindness given and received, of a dream not just realized, but shared. The road ahead would still have its challenges, she knew, but now she faced it, not with a heart heavy with unseen burdens, but with hands ready to work a spirit rekindled and a community by her side. The wheels of compassion, set in motion by a single selfless act, were turning beautifully, carrying her and so many others towards a future filled with promise. And Sarah Miller, mechanic mother, and now miracle worker in her own right, was finally truly home. Sarah Miller's journey from the brink of despair to the heart of a thriving, hopeful community reminds us that sometimes the deepest shadows fall just before the most extraordinary dawn. Isn't it often the case that the quiet acts of kindness, the choices made from the heart, even when the cost seems too high, are the ones that echo loudest in the universe, returning to us in ways we could never predict? Perhaps her story mirrors moments in our own lives, or the lives of those around us, where resilience is tested and the true value of a helping hand becomes immeasurably clear. This story has certainly left a profound impression on us, and we imagine it might have touched you too. What part of Sarah's unwavering spirit, or the almost unbelievable turn her life took, resonated most deeply with you? We'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. And as we continue to bring you stories that explore the depths of human experience, your feedback is invaluable. If you have any ideas on how we can make these journeys even more compelling, or if there's something in today's storytelling you'd like us to refine, please do share your suggestions. Your insights help us grow and craft better narratives every day. If Sarah's story moved you, please give this video a like, and if you feel it might bring a little hope or a moment of reflection to someone else, consider sharing it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss out on our next exploration into the heart of what it means to be human. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Until next time, may you find kindness in unexpected places.